Every story has a beginning, middle, and end. This video is going to look at beginnings. Where does a story start? For each of us, our life story starts at birth. That isn't usually where a story starts. In the hero's journey that I talked about in another video, the hero starts in normal life. However, this isn't generally that exciting to read about. So where should the story start? How should it start? And what needs to be in the first chapter? The first chapter in a book is incredibly important, as it does many important things. First, it makes a promise to the reader. The chapter promises the tone of the book, the basic story, the setting, the genre, the writing style, the morals, and even the ending. No, it doesn't give spoilers, but it does give the reader an idea of if the story is going to end happily or be a tragedy. The first chapter also introduces main characters. Starting a story right is important, so choose carefully where you start your story. My advice is to start with an inciting incident. When asked by people where they should start their story, my first question is usually, where does the hero get pulled into the story? Usually that's a good place to start. If the story is started too early, it drags as the call to action won't come soon, and life in the normal world isn't very adventurous. If the story starts too late, there's too much backstory, and the main character is already developed, rather than letting the reader watch him develop. There is no cookbook answer to where to start a story, as good writing can't be cookbooked, and all stories are different. But generally, looking at where the main character is pulled in the adventure is a good place to start. Again, that isn't in stone. Sometimes something else must happen first. But where the hero is pulled in is a good first question to ask when deciding where to start. I like to start with some inciting incident. Readers don't know the characters when they start reading, so they really don't care about in-depth backstories. I remember being stressed one day and wanting to read a good book. So I picked up a book and started reading. The first few pages were about some people standing on a balcony watching a ship come in and talking about the man who was coming in on it. I put the book down and didn't read it. Why? Because I didn't care about the man coming in. I didn't know him. I had no attachment to him, and I figured if that was the way the author was starting the story, I would be bored all through it. Start with an inciting incident, something to capture the reader's attention. Then the reader will care about the daily life and backstory. Let me give an example from one of my novels, The Frothy Mug. Okay, let me find it. Hold on. It was my first swashbuckler. I wrote it over 15 years ago. It begins. Chapter 1. Bandits. The moon gave a dreamlike feel to the woods around him as his horse raced through the night. Daniel crouched lower on the neck of his horse, urging it forward. He didn't expect pursuit yet, but he wanted to get as much distance between him and the kingdom of Avery as he could. The dark mass of the trees blotted out the stars, making the world seem somehow larger and more terrifying than it was by the light of day. Daniel had never traveled alone at night before. He felt eyes staring at him through the darkness, and he felt that someone or something was watching him, though he knew it was merely his imagination running away with him. By the faint moonlight, he could see a log blocking the path, but his horse could jump it easily. He kicked in his heels to tell the horse to jump, and the horse rose in the air, easily clearing the log. Daniel, however, didn't. He rose with his horse, but then felt something hit him across his chest, perhaps some invisible rope. He flew back off the horse. His back hit the log, and he rolled to the ground with the wind knocked out of him. That was unexpected. He didn't even see whatever hit him. He'd have to brush it off and go on, but he couldn't get up. He just lay in the dirt in shock. What had just happened? He looked up to see what had trapped him, but instead saw a man staring at him. The man said nothing, but laughed mockingly. Daniel saw the man pull his fist back. He tried to reach for his sword, but he was too late. The sting of the impact of the man's fist on his jaw burned through him, and his world went black, deep black. Now that's just the first few paragraphs. Trust me that it gets more exciting from there. My point in reading it is to show that in this story, the inciting incident is where Daniel gets pulled into this adventure. The rest of the chapter makes my promises and should get the reader wanting to read more. The first book I ever wrote was Heroes of Hearth. Look for my video on the story behind it. It's interesting. I had never written a novel before, and when I first wrote it, it started off with a knife throwing act in a circus in a fantasy world. The knife thrower, Trixie, is bubbly and happy, and the scene was funny. Well, until the inciting incident during it. The feedback I got from honest friends was that the beginning gave the wrong feel for the book. The book is not a comedy. It does have comedy in it, but it's an intense, epic fantasy. As a result of their feedback, I changed the first chapter to warn the reader this book isn't all going to be fluffy bunnies and comic scenes. Let me get the book and show you how the first few paragraphs read now. Chapter 1 The Performance. You have failed me for the last time, Urvan, Thalis hissed as he glanced around furtively to be sure no one was watching. Only several horses tethered nearby and the surrounding woods themselves witnessed their conversation, so his secret was assured. Their deathly silence cloaked Thalis as he glared at the cowering Urvan with burning eyes. His glare broke as the resounding cheer from the circus tent across the meadow made him glance up quickly. The wind then rustled the trees, whispering as if they anticipated what he was about to do. He drew back slightly into the woods with Urvan to be sure that he could not be seen from the kingdom's walls. All seemed quiet as the sun drifted below the horizon. Thalis snarled at Urvan. I ask only a simple murder, and it was too much for you. Urvan cowered backward, tripping over his words in fear. She was so young and seemed so innocent, so I wondered what she'd done to. So you went soft, Thalis sneered. We can't have that in the guild. His cold glare held Urvan's gaze, and his dagger slid silently and covertly from its sheath. Urvan trembled. It won't happen again. I'm sure it won't, Thalis hissed as he slid the dagger under Urvan's ribs toward his heart. Urvan opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The attack had been too swift, and Thalis too well practiced in the art of silent murder. Urvan's eyes dilated, and he fell to the ground. Thalis chuckled victoriously. I'm quite sure you'll never fail me again. A cheer from the nearby circus tent echoed through the deathly silence as if to praise Thalis for his swiftness or condemn him, but he knew they couldn't know of what he had just done. Thalis kicked the dead body behind a tree, washed his hands and arms in the stream, and picked up his cloak. He fastened it over the blood-stained clothes and walked to the circus tent as if he was innocent. He had left no clues to the murder that had just been committed on the outskirts of the kingdom of Hearth. Then I turn to what is going on inside the circus tent and switch to a more comic scene. Well, until it isn't, as something big happens. This introduction does many things. I've established that this is a kingdom, not modern day, that the setting is fantasy. I've established a writing style. I've warned the reader that the book is going to be bloody at times, but if you read the rest of the chapter, you'll get my promise that it's not going to be horror or a tragedy. Definitely there is an inciting incident. Actually, not the only one in the first chapter, as those paragraphs were introducing the inciting incident. The first chapter must not only make promises, introduce the setting, characters, and plot, but it must catch the reader's interest and make them want to read more. One of the ways to do this is to get the reader to ask questions, not questions because they are confused, but because they are curious. In the first few paragraphs of The Frothy Mug, were you curious about who Daniel is? Why was he racing through the woods at night? Who was pursuing him? Who set the trap that he fell into? Who punched him? Now, there is a huge difference between mystery and confusion. Obviously, you aren't supposed to know any of that yet, so it's not confusing, just information still to get. In the first few paragraphs of Heroes of Hearth, did you ask yourself questions? Why was Yvonne sent to murder a young, seemingly innocent girl? Who is the band of cutthroats? Thalas walks into the circus tent. Why? If he just killed one of his own men outside of it, what is his plot inside? Now, these are only the first few paragraphs, so I didn't have much time to pique curiosity. So read the first chapters. Even better, read the entire books. My point now is that you have to make your promise, introduce key characters, and capture interest in the first chapter. That's not all, though. I have had discussions with people about how to start books, and argued with people who say that the story must start with normal life, as a hero's journey insists. That's debatable. Normal life can be brief and interrupted with the inciting incident, or shown after the inciting incident, or not really shown at all and told in backstory. I've had people argue that normal life has to be established and that there doesn't need to be some inciting incident. The inciting incident doesn't have to be a murder or a man charging through the woods at night on a horse trying not to be found by people pursuing him. The inciting incident may be some change in the person's normal life. In my book, The Nameless, which is a dystopia, the first chapter doesn't have a huge battle or anything, but does show normal life, which in dystopias is unusual and shows the dystopian system. But there is also a change. An announcement made changes everything, and the world will not be the same again for the protagonist. Thus, your inciting incident will generally take one of two forms. First, action that is part of normal life for the hero, or second, a change in normal life, which either is or will lead to the call to action. A good example from my book for the second would be Stryker Academy. Let me get it. The first line in the book reads, Neo woke up to his alarm for school feeling much better. After all, he had died the day before. This starting sentence not only has the questions of who is Neo, but how did he die? And how is he waking up after having died feeling better? Well, this is normal life for Neo, so the first chapter shows his unusual normal life, but it also ends with a change. I won't give spoilers, but with what he learns in the first chapter, he will be thrown into an adventure where his life will not be the same again. Generally, it's best to start introducing your main character in the first chapter. The story may not allow that, but as a general rule, the reader will consider whoever the first chapter is about is going to be the hero or heroine of the story. If the main character can't be introduced in the first chapter, then make sure the character in the first chapter is significant. Don't have your inciting incident with random or insignificant characters. The final part of the first chapter is the hook. something that will make the reader really want to keep reading. I won't give spoilers as examples, but the chapter needs to end with something that challenges the reader to keep reading. Wow, that's a lot in the first chapter. I warned you that first chapters are important. To sum up, the start of your story must make promises to the reader. The tone, the ending, the morals, the writing style, and the basic story. You will also introduce main characters, catch attention, have some change, and end in a hook. The first chapter isn't the end of the beginning of the book. The beginning of the book may take several chapters. It will include the inciting incident, normal life, and the call to action. Everything up through the call to action and the hero leaving on the adventure is the beginning of the story. That's first chapters in a nutshell. Does it apply to life? Yes. We have many first chapters in our lives. Every time we start something new, we are starting a new chapter. Even more basic, every day is the start of the rest of our lives. So when you get up in the morning, what promises are you making to people? What do your words and actions say about you? Every day is a new beginning. So start today to make your life better and be the hero you want to be. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and make a comment. I would love to hear what you think from only the first line from Stryker Academy, which was, Neil woke up to his alarm for school feeling much better. After all, he had died the day before. What you would guess the book is about, and if that one line makes you want to read the first chapter. People judge books by their covers all the time. How would you judge it by its first line?